Good morning. Welcome to the Eastman Financial Report. I'm Dan Eastman, your host, and today is Friday, July 25th, 2025. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Eastman Financial Report. As always, we appreciate your viewership, you taking time out of your busy schedule to watch us broadcast live, 11:30 to 12 Central, Monday through Friday on the great Worldview Tube Network. And we appreciate that viewership. And we also appreciate your viewership throughout the day on all of the fine programming you see on VWTV, which is worldviewtube.com, or Worldview Radio. All of that is what we do in our ministry to bring a Christian worldview to the hot topics and ideas of the day. As you know, we've been broadcasting in this space since 2006, and it's our ministry, our mission, our goal to take the news and information of the day and bring it to that great marketplace of ideas, that global marketplace of ideas, and bring it from a Christian perspective. So we bring our Christian worldview and viewpoint along with the information into that cacophony of noise that creates the great marketplace of ideas. And of course, I'm sure if you're watching this program, you are certainly tuned in to other news sources throughout the day, and you realize that there are a lot of competing voices in that marketplace of ideas. And that's why it's so important for us to continue our Christian ministry by bringing this information from our specific worldview, our Christian worldview. If you'd like to help us in that ministry, that mission, that effort, you can do that by going to worldviewfoundation.com. And you can click on that website and you can make a donation, and that helps us out. You can sign up for a one-time donation, or you can sign up for repeat donations. And those have the added benefit of flattening our revenue curve so we can better match costs to revenue and keep our income line positive so that we can continue to bring this information to the great marketplace of ideas free of charge. And keep in mind, 2,000 years ago, when the apostles were spreading the gospel throughout the Middle East, they didn't charge admission. This wasn't a show that people paid admission to come and hear. No, the gospel message was freely given throughout the world. Go forth, make disciples of all nations. And that's what we're doing here. This is our slice of that activity, of that Christian global church ministry. And this is how we do it. And any donations you make, whether it be a one-time donation or repeat donations, is really helpful. You can also help our network by buying things from the companies you see advertising throughout the day on our network. We don't sell blocks of advertising time. Rather, we partner with companies we know and trust. And when you do business with them, you buy the goods and services. A small portion of those proceeds comes back to Worldview Tube in the form of commission. And that, of course, also helps us establish our revenues and keeping us in the black so we can continue to offer free content. A third way to help, and this is kind of neat, if you go to worldviewtube.com/vault, you type that in, it'll bring you up to our new Vault product. And it's coming up right on the bottom of the screen here, worldviewtube.com Vault. And if you subscribe, and there is a fee, but if you subscribe to the Vault, you get access to all of Brandon Howe's ministerial works over the last 20 plus years. He's written quite a number of books and conferences and seminars. All of those have been recorded, and all of those recordings and data live in the Vault. So if you're looking for real-time access to information, maybe you're like me and you can't sleep at 2 in the morning, you can go into the Vault, and there's very, very great selection of very interesting information, and it's yours to have. And of course, by subscribing to the Vault, you're also helping the network. And I'll point out that the reruns to the Eastman Financial Report all live in the Vault. So if you want to check my work or call me out, subscribe to the Vault, and you'll be able to see every last second of video that's in there. Anyway, those are the 3 ways to help our ministry. You can make a donation, or you can do business with the people who advertise, or you can subscribe to the Vault, or you can do all 3, which would be even better. But in any event, we really appreciate your viewership first and foremost. And of course, we appreciate any help you can give us, any financial help. Well, let's jump into the news today. And of course, there's quite a bit of news. One of the things I was talking about earlier this week is the pressure on the electrical system. And I want to just talk about that a little bit more because it's very much, it's an important topic of the day. And it's germane to what we're looking at on a go-forward basis as a high-tech society. Now, if you listen to yesterday's Eastman Financial Report, I went into great detail about how the electrical system is structured, going all the way back to Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla. It's an interesting lecture, and you may want to capture that before it goes into the Vault, or you can subscribe to the Vault and you can listen to it as many times as you like. But the point is, I was talking about how our entire digital existence is based upon technology that was created back in the early 1900s, and it effectively means that there's a generator spinning somewhere at 60 times per second, 60 cycles per second. And this is the power that comes out through the transmission lines, those great big lines you see across the country, down to the substations in your neighborhood, into the distribution wires, and right into your homes. All of that is 60 cycle power. And it's really, really important that it stays 60 cycles per second throughout the 24-hour period. There can't be fluctuations in the power because that has a tendency to burn out the older equipment, refrigerators and washing machines and that sort of thing. And it really can raise a little bit of concern within the digital environment itself, because when you think about it, you're watching me most likely on a computer screen or a flat screen TV. And all of that requires constant power. Now, mind you, the new devices of today have capacitors inside that are tending to stabilize the power. So I'm not flickering on and off 60 times per second. The point is we need stable power within the United States to continue our very, very digital, sophisticated existence. And that's why when you look at the PJM, the Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland region, the reliability region, which is 65 million people in that region. And you're looking at them doing maximum capacity alerts yesterday. It's a little cooler today, at least up here in these parts of the woods. But the point is, when you get to the point where there's more demand for electrons than there are electrons being generated, you run into a system problem where certain circuits or even the whole system can go dark. And you may see rolling blackouts where they go to emergency measures where they will shut off certain large load or certain regions within the region, like your neighborhood, in an event to shed load so that they can maximize generation, and you have to match load to generation. This is a complicated process that is now quite digital. Of course, digital takes electricity, but the point is, while it's significantly automated, unlike it was maybe back in the 1950s and 60s, where there are human beings, turning knobs, this is our existence with respect to electricity. And as I was talking about just before the show ended, when you think about it, if your money is now digital at your bank, I mean, money goes in direct deposit, and it's in there, and then it gets paid out, you pay your bills electronically. That requires electricity to do. But if you think about, if you've ever experienced a blackout, and sometimes the power goes out in your neighborhood and it's a little frustrating, but if the cell phones are working, you can still get into your bank account and this and that. If you were to have a systemic blackout, everything stops. Now there's battery backup for cell phone towers and this and that, but our entire financial system, our information system, our health system, our data transfer system, and more our retail buying systems all depend upon stable electric power. And that's why this is such an important thing. I talked about this at length yesterday as to why we should be thinking about infrastructure enhancements in the United States to make sure that there are enough electrons to go around so that everybody who wants to have electrons can have them and all of your stuff works. Because if we were to lose power, given the fact that we've become so dependent on a digital society, you could use the metaphor of being thrown back into the Stone Age, but if you stop and think about it, if there was a systemic problem where the lights were off for a week or 10 days, it would start to look a little Stone Age-ish because, you think about it, you can't pump gasoline into your car. And of course, if you have an electric car, well, good luck with that. There's no electrons to be had, electron scarcity. So this is an interesting problem, and that's why nations and countries in the United States were looking very carefully at this situation. And that leads me to a story in the UK. I said, well, what do we care about the UK? This is America. Well, it's an interesting phenomenon because if you think about it, His Majesty, King Charles III of the United Kingdom of England, is a real proponent of environmentalism. As a matter of fact, he's sitting over there worrying that his island is going to sink beneath the waves and he will be wiped off the map. He's very concerned about environmental issues. But interestingly, what has happened is the UK government, and that's his government. You have to keep in mind, it's a little different in the UK. Over here, we the people are the government, and boy, what a government we have in Washington. Hey, folks, 37 trillion in debt, 2.5 trillion annual operating deficit, and boy, the band plays on. Over there, it's different. The king owns the whole thing, owns the whole island. He has a government, has his own government. That's powerful. Not only does he own the whole island, he's got his own government. It's His Majesty's government, and what that government has done, of course, is they they have approved the building of a second nuclear power plant in England. It's the second one in 20 years. And keep in mind, these take a very long time to site and permit, and nobody wants a nuclear power plant in their backyard, and the litigation. It takes a long time to get there. But what is proposed is a $51 billion plant that will generate 3.2 gigawatts of power. It's hard to explain what a gigawatt is. We start out with a watt, okay, because that's the basic unit. So if you have a hair dryer, it's 1,500 watts of power. Well, this is 3.2 gigawatts. You can Google that and figure out what it means, but it's a vast amount of power coming out of this plant. And this is the second plant they're producing, and it is projected that they will need that much more power to power their society. So they're going to go build it. So what does that have to do with King Charles? He should be happy, right? He's not going to walk around in a castle holding candles. The point is, 20 to 30 to 40 years ago, the environmental community was absolutely apoplectic, absolutely against nuclear power. It was the greatest threat to mankind. What do you do with the fuel? It lasts a half-life is a zillion years. I'm going to bury it in Utah. I mean, it was an absolute environmental no-no. Anybody who was on the environmental side of the aisle, nuclear power would make their hair stand on end and flames come out of their eyes. But today it's different, because the environmentalists realize that if this concept of carbon in the atmosphere, and I tend to think carbon, the CO2 that gets emitted, gets sucked up by the plants. And we've got a lot of plants up here in Wisconsin. And it's pretty green this time of year. But the point is, if CO2 is an issue, I don't believe it is. But if it's an issue in the minds of these people, then certainly an electric power source that doesn't emit CO2 would be a good thing. And that's why they like wind power, because wind blows and turns a little turbine once in a while, and you can capture that in a DC battery like Edison was talking about. You can discharge DC into an AC system through converters. It's not really efficient, but it's symbolic. And, symbolism means everything in Washington. And the same thing with solar. When the sun creates electricity, it's stored in batteries and then, again, discharges into an AC system through converters. It's just simply not enough generation to make a difference. As a matter of fact, there's calculations that say if you cover the whole Earth in solar panels, the energy from the sun hitting the Earth as the Earth is spinning, they get a couple hours a day, 12 hours a day of sunlight. It's about 7% of our current load. Well, 7% is less than 10%. It's nothing. It's nothing at all. So it's very symbolic. All of the renewables, the wind and the solar, was symbolic reaction to the emission of carbon dioxide from the burning of fossil fuels. Well, what are fossil fuels? Well, oil and natural gas and coal. Now, apparently, oil and natural gas and coal are carbon substances. And it all came from the dinosaurs. When the dinosaurs got buried under, 2 miles of soil somehow, and then they rotted, and then all of a sudden there's this pools of oil. And this oil's been flowing for over 120 years. This is fossils. They're supposed to be, generated from dinosaurs and plants from 1,000 million years ago, whatever. The point is, the idea of burning stuff and emitting into the air, it was a real negative for the environmental crowd. And so they like solar and wind, non-emitting. The solar and wind just simply cannot produce the amount of energy needed for artificial intelligence, which is the cool thing du jour, or perhaps big server farms that store data on every last molecule of your existence. So these systems are taking up more and more and more power. So what we're seeing, and this comes back to King Charles being an environmentalist, is suddenly building a nuclear plant on an island like Japan. If you think of Fukushima, that was a real mess. Seems to be the better alternative. So while we encourage him to do what he needs to do to keep his island from sinking beneath the waves, and while he's at it, he's running Canada or owning it. But the point is that they're building a nuclear plant. Okay, so this is the United States. What do we care about the UK? Well, in the United States, we're starting to see this type of emergence as well. If you think of the 3 Mile Island situation back in, I think it was in 1977, 78, 79, in that period, 3 Mile Island in the river in Pennsylvania, there was a leak in the nuclear plant. Everybody freaked out. And of course, Chernobyl in Ukraine back in the day, where that was a scary one because that core melted into the earth. There was a lot of blowback about the dangers of nuclear power. But think for a moment, all of that nuclear technology was invented right after World War II. It's Albert Einstein and the Manhattan Project in Chicago, they came up with the first atomic bomb, and figuring out how do you take this nuclear reaction, a fission reaction where atoms are being split, it releases amazing amounts of energy. Remember, E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. That's, if you do that, and I wouldn't try this at home, if you do that, you will release nuclear explosion. And that's what was captured in nuclear reactors, because, first they were thinking, well, if we can split an atom, we can blow up the Germans and the Japanese. They did that, or at least the Japanese, sadly. But what happened is they harnessed that physics into a usable product, and that was going to change the world. We'd all be nuclear powered, and energy would be too cheap to meter. They say it would be free electricity for everyone. Well, it wasn't that way, because what happened with nuclear testing, unfortunately, in the early days, they were testing it in the atmosphere, and people nearby were developing leukemia and cancer at a rather startling rate. And it became clear that radiation and radioactivity was unhealthy for humans. So it became a real hot button in the 1950s and 60s, first to develop the technology, but then to regulate the technology, and then, of course, to protect the people. So, of course, nobody wanted to live next to a nuclear power plant, because all you had in your mind was the images of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which are horrifying, and the Barry Goldwater, the political ad in 1964, where they just thought Barry Goldwater was going to blow up the little girl in the field with the daisy. This was the scare in the American mind, and that scare lasted from the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s into the year 2000s, and it was a major concern. But what's interesting is it's not a major concern today, because people want to have artificial intelligence. I mean, everybody's using that, ask questions, what size is my refrigerator, whatever you ask in the thing, and it always knows. That's important. And effectively what we're seeing is a paradigm shift, yet again, another digital paradigm shift. If you go back to humans in the 1970s, we had, bag phones, and this idea of a cell phone was pretty cool. I mean, James Bond had one, and you could buy one too for thousands of dollars. It morphed into smartphones. And now, of course, we have smartphones that control just about everything in our lives. With apps, you can go from your health to your finances to your communications. It's all there. And of course, computers. In 1984, we have, computers and screens and this and that. We've gone from computers to iPhone or cell phones, smartphones, and now we're merging into AI. We don't have to think so much. There's somebody on the other end that'll do all the thinking for you and theoretically give you the correct answers. Maybe not, but what we're seeing is a real push in that direction, and it takes massive amounts of electricity to do it. So we should expect to see more nuclear development in the U.S., where our environmentalists are saying, it's the least of the evils, and we might as well have nuclear because we don't have fossil fuels being burned, and we don't, you're never going to capture enough energy with the sun and the wind. So we're starting to see a real social paradigm shift, and that's a fascinating sociological perspective. Yeah, I'm going to take a break, and we'll talk about some other news. I'll be right back. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
Okay, welcome back. So I just want to wrap up on the energy situation. I would suggest that as a student, you follow the developments in the electric industry. It's kind of a mundane, boring, regulated industry, but it's not as boring and mundane as it was. And with the technological demands for more power, the ratepayers, the people who pay electric bills, you really have to pay attention to cost shifting. Do the AI farms and the big server farms shift the cost to the residential consumer? Is the residential consumer paying too much for the electricity they use? Are the IA and server people paying enough for the energy they use? That's the regulatory issue. And that's why the states all regulate monopoly utilities, because where you live in a monopoly. You don't usually, in a few states, but you will not have the choice to go shopping for electricity. Some states have tried models, this and that. But the reality is there's one electric company and you're paying the rates, and the state government is going to tell you what that rate is. And you want to make sure that that rate is for the cost to generate electricity for you, plus a reasonable profit for the electric company, or if it's a co-op or municipal, then no profit. But you don't want to be paying and subsidizing the big AI farms. And that's going to be the next big rate battle in many, many states. Now, trust me, I know. I was on the Public Service Commission here in Wisconsin for 3 years, and it was back in a contentious time when we were trying to merge companies to create economies of scale, and that didn't work real well. We also spun off transmission. We should have kept that in as a regulated asset. But the point is, today, the big battle is, should the residential ratepayer be paying to subsidize this big AI stuff? And that's the question. So you should pay attention when your rate case comes up, and maybe, just follow the dialogue, because that is going to be the issue du jour. Okay, and what does that matter is because when we take a look at the numbers for the American consumer, it is still not a happy place to be. We're looking at the big companies who are imported stuff and dealing with the tariff negotiations. And of course, it's been turbulent, but this is a attack that President Trump has taken, and he's coming and bringing the world together. It's amazing what President Trump is doing. If you put the political fuzz out of your mind and watch the economics, just watch the economic results of what President Trump is doing. He is structuring a global sales tax scheme that is helping to subsidize the treasuries of the national governments. When you want to sell stuff into Germany, we got to pay a 10, 15% tariff. You want to sell German cars here, you got to pay a 10 or 15% tariff, whatever it is. That is revenues coming into these federal governments that is theoretically supposed to be closing the $2.5 trillion deficit gap, which should hopefully shorten or at least shrink our $37 trillion in national debt. So this is an important play that he's doing. But the story is that the companies have been eating the cost because they don't want to pass the cost of the tariff through to their customers. And you say, why not? Why don't we soak the customers and they'll get mad and they'll vote for somebody else next time? Well, companies spend a vast amount of their corporate resources in developing something called market share. Say there's a market for something. Let's say cars. The market is 100% of all the cars sold. And if you're General Motors or Ford or Toyota or wherever, you're fighting for a percentage of that market. And when you look at the cost of increasing your market share by 1%, it's very expensive. And what you don't want to do is raise your prices to lose market share and give it to somebody who's still eating tariffs. Because in the long run, market share is vastly more important than this quarter's sales. So they're willing to back off and perhaps yield profit in this quarter or this year in order to preserve that all-important market share. And that's why when you see that headline, the companies are eating the cost. Why would they do that? Why not pass it through? Let's cause a little political upheaval here. And you don't want to do that because it'll take you 10, 20 years to get market share back. It's very expensive. You can create clever advertising. You've got to have products that are second to none. People want to say, oh, it's a higher quality, it's lower price, smaller margins. It's very expensive. So that's why companies are very careful about protecting market share, and they're willing to do this. And President Trump knows that because it's not like the companies are all helping him out. It's everybody is watching and waiting because everybody knows at the end of the day, when this system is in place and all the negotiating is done and all the tariffs are negotiated, we're going to have a much better financing of global operations and government operations than we have today, where it's all on the back of the taxpayers. 165 million American taxpayers are paying $5 trillion in taxes, and we're spending $7.2 trillion. Well, that's not sustainable. So how do you fix it? Well, I could raise the taxes on the 165 million. That would cause some election disruption, or you can go figure out another source of revenue. What better revenue is it? If you want to sell in the United States, you got to pay the Treasury. Just like, in our state, we have a sales tax. You want to buy something at the store, Well, we're going to send 5.5% off to the government. That's how we fund our operations. And this is the same concept. Interestingly, I watch the news every day, and there's only one other commentator that's picked up on this idea. So you've heard it here first. Don't think that because you watch an obscure financial report on a small Christian network that you're missing the big news. You're not. You're seeing quite often, and I don't want to, break my arm patting myself on the back here, but trust me, there are times when I'm talking about an issue that shows up in the major media couple of days later. So the point is, I do my homework, and what I'm telling you is, if I tell you to watch electricity, watch electricity. If I'm telling you to watch tariffs, watch the tariffs. Another interesting thing in the news is the fact that the banks are starting to tighten their credit standards for issuing new credit cards. And of course, if you look at the credit card debt in the United States, it's vast, over $1 trillion, and it just keeps going and going. And the question is, why are people putting more and more of their expenses on revolving credit at 18 or 25, whatever percent interest it is? It's because people simply don't have enough take-home pay to make ends meet. And we talked about this earlier in the week about housing prices. Housing prices continue to go up, and 70+% of Americans, when you look at their take-home pay, they don't have enough money to buy a house under current mortgage rates, and groceries and car payment and insurance and this and that. So 70% of the Americans are on the sideline because the mortgage rates are too high. But you could also argue that the 70% of the Americans on the sideline, the take-home pay is too low. Perhaps you need more money. And the question is, what's take-home pay? Well, you get your gross pay. If you have a W-2, if you work for somebody, they give you a W-2 paycheck. Take a look at the numbers. Here's your gross pay, and then all the deductions that come along. And then what's left is your net take-home pay. And that net take-home pay is what you've got to live on, and that has to pay all your bills. So when you look at it, the question becomes, are the mortgage rates too high, or are the incomes too low? I would like to see higher incomes because they have to. If you look at the change of delta in median take-home pay since the 1970s, it's been hovering around $80,000 to $81,000 for a very long time. If you look at the median price of homes, and I talked about this yesterday, was it existing homes? Existing home sales. The median price of existing homes is $335,300. But that curve looks like this, a real positive slope versus the take-home pay curve, which is almost flat. That's the problem. So how do you get more money into the pockets of Americans? Well, we could tax them less. But if we tax them less, then our $2.5 trillion in annual operating deficit becomes $3 trillion or more. And that national debt is $37 trillion, $38 trillion, $39 trillion, up and away it goes. And that's why this idea of a sales tax through the tariff is important, because you can start to change that curve. You can also change the curve by lowering the taxes of the American people, or perhaps getting rid of the income tax and going to a national sales tax. Not both, but we've got a constitutional amendment, the 16th Amendment of the United States Constitution, created this ability to tax income. That was the serfdom amendment to the United States Constitution. We went from a free people to a people where the federal government can turn you into a serf. What does a serf mean? Well, it means they can tax a portion of your productive labor to the common good. And that 16th Amendment alone changed, that's why when Americans talk about freedom, it started out that way in 1776, but over 250 years, the political change in the way we've structured our Constitution has been rather devastating. And that 16th Amendment was a real bad situation for the individuals, because you're sovereign. You're sovereign. The federal government of the United States has the ability to take from you a portion of your labor. This almost sounds like, if you think about before the Constitution, in the South, they took 100% of some people's labor. That was bad. That was really bad. Well, now they only take 35%. So the point is, we're in a situation where the American consumer needs and money. And I think this is something that's policy we're really going to have to take a look at. Well, that's all I've got for the week. It's been a real pleasure being able to bring this to you all week long. Thank you so much for listening to the Eastman Financial Report. And please consider making a donation at worldviewfoundation.com. We really appreciate your viewership and your support in helping us keep this Christian ministry alive. Have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you next week. Take care. Bye.